Right now, the aviation world is being lied to. While the industry tries to force you into million-dollar plastic toys, smart mechanics are quietly hoarding these 10 tractor airframes that statistically refuse to fail. You have been told that old means dangerous, and that beauty means safety. That is a lie. In the world of survival, a law of physics never lies. In 2026, these rugged World War II-era machines are still dominating the sky. When your engine stops over a forest of jagged pine trees, you do not want a luxury airplane. You want a heavy metal bank vault built with chromoly steel and brute force. We have analyzed the NTSB records and polled veteran A and P mechanics to find the 10 industrial legends that walk away from wrecks that leave modern planes in pieces. Are you ready to stop buying for your ego and start buying the sky jeeps that will outlast us all? Sticker shock is the first lesson for anyone eyeing a so-called modern airplane. A new composite trainer, slick and shiny, will bleed you for $50,000 more than a working man's Cessna 150. The numbers do not lie. The average asking price for a late-model composite trainer sits at $75,000, while a serviceable Cessna 150 still changes hands for $30,000, sometimes less if you know the right A and P mechanic. That's a $45,000 spread before you even swing a wrench. And that's just the buy-in. Annual maintenance on a composite can run $5,800 or more, with every little crack demanding a factory fix, while a steel tube tractor like the 150 averages $2,200 a year. Mechanics hoard these old birds for a reason. You can patch a dented door, weld a cracked tube, and get back in the air before the coffee cools. But this is not just about saving cash. It is about what happens when the engine coughs over a frozen lake and you are out of options. On February 17, 2009, a Cessna 150 was forced down onto a frozen lake in Minnesota. The docket, CEN09 IA172, reads like a blueprint for survival. Low-speed touchdown, steel tube fuselage, and fixed gear took the load. Both occupants walked away, not a scratch. The NTSB investigator wrote, "The steel tube fuselage and fixed gear absorbed the load without deformation, low-speed envelope-limited impact energy." That's not luck. That's physics and old-school engineering doing exactly what it was built to do. Speed is the real killer. The kinetic energy at impact goes up with the square of speed, double the speed, quadruple the punch. These tractors stall at 55 knots, not 110 knots. When things go sideways, they hit the dirt with a quarter of the energy of the plastic speedsters. That's why the blue-collar crowd calls the Cessna 150 a sky jeep. It is not pretty, but it protects the meat inside. You do not need a Ferrari in the woods. You need a Ford tractor. That's why the smart mechanics are hoarding these old machines. They know what survives a wreck, and it is not the soda cans with a glass cockpit. It is the bank vaults built by the same minds that won World War II. The Piper Tri-Pacer is not the darling of the ramp. It is squat, broad, and about as glamorous as a lunchbox. But ask anyone who has spent real time wrenching on these machines, and you will find out why smart mechanics stash every spare strut and gear leg they can get their hands on. The secret is in its geometry. The Tri-Pacer's fixed gear stands wide, over 6 feet from wheel to wheel. That is not for looks. That is to keep the airplane upright when the runway turns to ruts or the landing goes sideways. Owners will tell you straight, the wide track gear is the difference between a bent Pride and a wrecked airplane. One Tri-Pacer pilot, a guy known around the field as Sky Jeep Willie, keeps a full set of duplicate landing gear in his hangar. Not because he is careless, but because he has seen what happens when you land a narrow track trainer in a crosswind, one bad bounce, and you are on your back. The Tri-Pacer shrugs it off. In the 2012 docket, after an off-runway excursion, the investigator wrote that the gear absorbed the load without cabin intrusion. That is the steel tube roll cage at work, doing exactly what the World War II engineers intended. The cabin stays solid. The gear bends maybe, but it does not shear off and send you tumbling. Walk through any tri-pacer owner group and you will hear the same logic. Keep a spare set of struts, a box of gear bolts, and a few control cables. Not because these parts fail, but because the smart ones know that when the day comes, you want to be back in the air before the weekend is out. That is why the tri-pacer is hoarded. It is not about nostalgia, it is about survival, field repair, and the kind of ruggedness you cannot buy from a glossy catalog. Mechanics call it the tractor logic. Keep it simple, keep it strong, and never trust a plane you cannot fix with a wrench and a welder. Next up, the Luscombe crowd takes it even further, turning repair culture into an art form. A Luscombe 8 sits on a backcountry strip, its silver skin patched in half a dozen places, looking more like a tool shed than a showpiece. But ask any mechanic worth his knuckles, and he will tell you that patchwork is a badge of honor. The Luscombe is where blue-collar repair culture reaches its purest form. Out here, nobody is waiting weeks for composite panels or calling the factory for permission. You rip a wing on a fence post, you grab a fabric kit and a roll of rib tape, and you are back in the air before the sun is down. There is a logbook entry from 2017. A pilot caught a gust, nosed over, snapped a rib, and tore fabric from the leading edge. By noon the next day, the rib was splintered, fresh fabric stretched, doped, and drying in the hangar. Total cost, under $500, including coffee for the crew. This is not just about saving a buck, it is about control. The Luscombe's steel tube skeleton and fabric skin were designed by engineers who built planes for war and expected them to take a beating. Every tube, every gusset, every field repair is a middle finger to the idea that you need a degree in composites or a factory representative to get flying again. Mechanics call it Luscombe patch culture. It is the art of turning a wrecked wing into a working machine with nothing but hand tools and grit. There is a reason the Luscombe crowd hoards old airframes and fabric kits. They are not collecting antiques. They are stockpiling assets, industrial-grade, field-serviceable machines that do not care about fashion or resale value. Around here, the only thing that matters is how fast you can patch, fly, and patch again. That is why, when the new school crowd talks about downtime and insurance claims, the Luscombe mechanics just shrug. They have already got the patch drying and the engine warming up. Sky Jeep Willie might be a legend, but in Luscombe country, every mechanic is a survivalist, and every patched wing is proof that the old ways still rule the sky. Steel tube construction is the backbone of real utility airplanes, the kind that get dragged out of a muddy field, patched up, and flown again. Old hands call it the iron vault effect. Chromoly 4130 is welded into a cage so tough you could drop it off a loading dock and still open the door. Not theory, just Stinson, Moll, and Champ, names that have earned their reputation when things go sideways. The Stinson 108 is a workhorse. Its floor is rated for 600 pounds, not for show, but for moose racks, chainsaws, and gravel bags, whatever a bush pilot needs. The floor is a reinforced steel tube lattice, skinned in wood, with anchor points every 6 inches. Land hard, the floor flexes, tubes take the load, and the cabin stays square. Mechanics call it the flying station wagon for a reason. It does not care if you are hauling groceries or gear for a month in the bush. It is built to be abused, patched, and sent back out. Welds are full penetration, tube walls thick, and the design comes straight from war factories. No hidden cracks, no composites to delaminate. If something bends, you heat it, straighten it, weld on a doubler, and it is back in service by Friday. The Moll M5 is not a boutique bush plane. Its flap area is a massive 72 square feet, more than double what you will find on most trainers. That is deliberate. When you need to drop into a gravel bar at walking speed, you want drag, you want lift, and you want the airplane to slow down so the energy at impact is as low as possible. The Moll's gear is a pair of steel legs, forged to take a pounding. Mounting points are gusseted, the oleo struts have enough stroke to absorb a fence post, and the main frame is a web of tube acting like a crumple zone. Mechanics collect moles because every wrecked fuselage is a donor for the next rebuild. The geometry is so forgiving, you can swap a bent tube in the field with a torch and tape measure. That is why Morley parts are hoarded like gold. Ercoupe Champ, Project 60293, docket dated September 12, 2004, had a nose-over on rollout and the pilot walked away untouched. The NTSB report is clear: the steel tube fuselage stayed intact, low speed kept forces manageable, and the cabin never deformed. That is the tube and fabric philosophy: let the skin tear, let the gear fold, but never let the cockpit collapse. The Champ proves that ugly, simple, and slow beats pretty and fast when the ground comes up quick. Veterans call it the Iron Vault. As mechanic Tom Harper puts it, the tubes bend, the skin rips, but the meat inside walks away. You can run all the energy numbers you want, but the real test is what happens when the airplane meets the dirt. Welded tubes, wide gear, barn door flaps, these machines are built to soak up punishment. They are survival tools, not fashion statements. That is why mechanics hoard them. Patch a Stinson, weld a Mall, tape up a Champ, and you are back in the air. The Iron Vault does not just survive, it wins. Crank open the toolbox and throw out the sales brochures. This is where survival gets measured in numbers, not paint jobs. Every mechanic who has patched a bent firewall knows the real math. Impact energy is not a feeling, it is a formula. The engineers wrote it on the chalkboard in big letters: 1/2 metion times v squared. Mass times speed squared divided by 2. That is not just algebra, it is the difference between walking away and getting scraped off the panel. Here is what they will not tell you at the flight school open house. Double your speed, and you do not just double the punch, you quadruple it. A touchdown at 100 knots hits with 4 times the energy of a 50-knot drop. That is the line every real mechanic keeps taped to the shop wall. 100 knots versus 50 knots yields 4 times the energy. You want to survive a wreck? You buy time by flying slow and flying heavy. That is why the old tractors, Cessna 150s, Tri-Pacers, and Champs, are built like rolling safes. They stall at 55 knots. When the engine coughs and you are out of altitude, they hit the dirt with 1/4 of the energy the fast glass cockpit crowd brings to the party. Let us put a number to it. The Cessna 150 weighs in at about 1,200 pounds. Drop it in at 55 knots, and you are looking at 2.2 million foot-pounds of impact energy. Now take a Cirrus SR-20, 1,700 pounds, coming in hot at 110 knots. That is 8.6 million foot-pounds. Same pilot, same day, but one airplane soaks up 4 times the punch. The slower, heavier, draggy old bird is the one that keeps the cockpit square and the meat inside protected. That is not nostalgia, that is physics, and it is the reason mechanics hoard these airframes like gold. You want a demonstration? Picture a drop test, a steel tube fuselage loaded up with sandbags, hoisted 2 meters in the air, and let go. The tube crushes, the gear legs splay, but the cockpit stays solid. That is the Iron Vault effect. The energy gets eaten up by metal bending and gear compressing, not by the cabin collapsing around you. Modern composites are stiff and light, but they shatter when the energy spikes. They do not crumple, they break. That is why you see so many old tractors patched and flying again, while the plastic birds get written off after a hard landing. Ask any engineer who has run the numbers. The 1/2 or m times v squared formula is the reason the blue-collar crowd bets on steel and drag over speed and style. The old war-era brains who built these machines understood something the magenta line crowd forgot. When things go sideways, it is not about how pretty you look on the ramp. It is about how much energy your airplane can soak up before it lets go. That is the secret behind every Sky Jeep and Iron Vault that is still flying today. And it is why the smart mechanics keep hoarding every ugly battered tractor they can find. Navion, Ercoupe, and Grumman AA-1. 3 names that surface whenever mechanics talk about planes that last. Each one is a survivor, built for the kind of days when things do not go as planned. The Navian, shaped by North American aviation, carries steel through its belly and a reputation for taking punishment. Docket 82575, December 27, 2011. Engine failure, hard landing, both occupants seriously injured but alive. The investigator wrote that the airframe remained largely intact. One owner sums it up that you can bend the gear, crunch the nose, but the cabin stays together, and that is why he keeps a spare firewall and never sells his old struts. The Ercoupe is the oddball, no rudder pedals, stall speed of 48 knots. Its safety-first design is more than marketing. One pilot, after a low-speed stall, told his mechanic that he felt the wheels smack, but the cabin barely shuddered. No drama, just a bruise. The numbers back him up. Ercoupe walk-away rates are among the best. Then there is the Grumman AA1. Only 30 are still registered, and each is a mechanic's favorite. Steel tube skeleton, low stall speed, and a reputation for being fixable with basic tools. You can fix an AA1 with a socket set and a roll of safety wire, an owner says. These are not showpieces, they are the planes that keep flying when others quit. July 23, 2021. A Cessna 180K, tail number N8884, comes down hard. Forced landing. Impact speed was 80 knots. The official report spells it out, cockpit intact. The pilot walks away with nothing worse than a bruised ego. No cabin intrusion, no firewall collapse, just bent metal where it's supposed to bend. That's the iron vault in action, World War II geometry, chromoly bones, and a bank vault cockpit built to take the punch. Ask any bush pilot who's hauled moose racks and fuel drums in a Skywagon. They'll tell you the Cessna 170 and 180 aren't just airplanes, they're industrial assets, tractors with wings, forged for the kind of work that shreds the pretty boys. The main gear is steel, not show chrome. The tailwheel is built for river bars. The firewall is braced like a bulldozer's blade. When the ground comes up fast, it's the old-school frame that keeps the meat inside protected. The FAA type certificate for the 180 series spells out the formula: alloy 2024T3, aluminum skin, 4130 steel tube tail, riveted ribs at 12-inch intervals. Everything overbuilt, everything field repairable. You want a checklist for survival? Here it is: steel under your seat, fixed gear, low stall speed, high drag cowl, and a wing you can patch with a rivet gun and a roll of tape. If you see a mechanic hoarding a 170 or 180 airframe, now you know why. This isn't nostalgia, this is survival engineering handed down from the war factories to the last honest bush strips. The Sky Jeep isn't a myth, it's the crown proof, the king of the tractors, and the last word in blue-collar aviation. Right now, the world worships speed and shine. But out here, the true survivors are Sky Jeep Willies, iron vaults built to take a punch and keep rolling. In a wreck, slow wins. Simplicity, tris. That is why the smart wrench turners hoard these tractors like gold. When the chips are down, it is the ugly machines that protect the meat inside. That is industrial survival. Share your own Sky Jeep stories in the comments.